Hi, good afternoon, and welcome to the Riverwood Conservancy's latest webinar. Look at all of the people that we have today. It's a full slate of panelists. Hopefully we get a lot of people joining in right now. I'm seeing all of our attendees just joining the call, so we'll give it a couple of minutes for everyone to trickle in. Thanks so much for taking some time out of your afternoon to join us today, and hope you're doing well, staying safe, and welcome once again to our Walk and Roll at Riverwood webinar. My name is Rashid Clark. I'm the marketing specialist at the Riverwood Conservancy. I'm joined today by Stephanie Keeler, Community Program Coordinator at the Riverwood Conservancy. We also have Jeffrey Driscoll, Program and Communications Coordinator at the Ontario Land Trust Alliance, and Rahul Mehta, Program Worker at CultureLink Settlement and Community Services. So yes, again, full slate of panelists here today. Thanks so much for joining us, and thank you to all the people who made this webinar possible, that being the TD Friends of the Environment Foundation, Peel Multicultural Council, the Region of Peel, CultureLink, and the Ontario Land Trust Alliance. So a lot of people coming together to put this wonderful presentation on and hopefully get you cycling at Riverwood safely, both safely for yourself, safely for hikers, and safely for the ecosystems at Riverwood. So before we get started, a couple of quick questions from us to get to know you a little bit more. And so I will bring up our first polling question, which is, are you a newcomer to Canada? So if you just drop your vote in so we get to know a little bit more about the makeup of the people who are in attendance today. Again, this webinar was geared primarily for newcomers to Canada. We want to get them obviously intertwined with the rest of our community, but for anyone who is interested in hiking or biking, of course, this webinar is for you as well. So we have all of our votes in, so I will end the polling on that. Thank you for that. And poll question number 2, do you feel green spaces in and around Mississauga are welcoming and accessible for you? And so you can let us know either yes, no, or somewhere in between. So we'll let the votes come in on our second poll question. Again, thanks for submitting your answers. Almost there. 5 of 9, come on, other 4 people. Yeah, just so that we get to know a little bit more about your perspectives on how green spaces in and around Mississauga are set up. We obviously want to make them as welcoming and engaging as possible for as many people as possible throughout our region, kind of the whole purpose of the work that all of our organizations do. So thank you for sharing that. See? Oh, and a little comment for someone who has worked with newcomers to Canada several years ago. So thanks to one of our attendees for sharing that with us. And thanks to everyone for voting in this poll. We'll give it another couple of seconds because I see we have a couple of new attendees who have just joined in. So if you wouldn't mind just letting us know if you feel green spaces in and around Mississauga are welcoming and accessible for you. And I will close that polling now. Okay. So that's all for the time being. Thank you for letting us know a little bit more about yourself as we get into our presentation today. So enough from me. I will turn things over to Stephanie for the first bit of our presentation. Stephanie.
Thank you, Rashid. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for the introduction. You can go to the next slide now. Before we get started, I just want to appreciate the land that we are working on, but as well that we are using recreationally in this particular instant for cycling. We would like to acknowledge the land on which we operate is the territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and the traditional homeland of the Anishinaabe, Wendat, and Haudenosaunee nations. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining me. And all of us, we have a lot of us today. So my name is Stephanie Keeler. I am the program coordinator, community program coordinator here at the Riverwood Conservancy. I've been here for about 3 years now, and prior to that, I was working as a teacher for kindergartens to grade 8 in the field. So hopefully we can get those school programs up and running soon. We are a volunteer and member-based charity. So we run on programming for environmental education, conservation, gardening, horticulture. There's whole lots of stuff that we do at the Riverwood Conservancy, and we are smack dab in the middle of Mississauga, so it's a kind of refuge for all different animals and plant life, and it's a very special place to many people that live here as well. So welcome everyone to the presentation, and we can turn it over to, I believe, Jeffrey is next.
Yep, and can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, so hi everyone. Oh, I think maybe it's not me actually.
Oh no. Jeffrey, I think you'll be after me.
Yeah.
That was
Sorry
my
about
fault.
that. So Jeffrey will be shortly in a second. My name is Rahil. So I am the program worker for a project called Mississauga Cycles. It's based in Meadowvale at Peel Multicultural Council. So both Peel Multicultural Council and CultureLink are settlement agencies in Mississauga and Toronto respectively. They're the core partners that brought this project to life with funding provided from the region of Peel. Immigration, Citizenship and Refugees Canada is supporting my fellow staff in these settlement agencies. So they are really helping newcomers integrate and connect with their new community with the services and programs they need. Our cycling program is a little different, and we'll talk about it after our main presentation, where we are trying to deliver some interesting sustainability programming, in this case, cycling to connect to your new home, your new community, and that's what Mississauga Cycles is all about. We're in our second year, and this is my second year in the position as well. And we're excited to do some more public outreach and programming like this. So thanks so much for having me.
Now we're good to go to Jeffrey.
Okay. Hi, everyone again. My name is Jeff Driscoll, and I work for the Ontario Land Trust Alliance, ULTA for short, as their Program and Communications Coordinator. I've been there for about a year and a half now, I believe. And ULTA, so my organization, is a charity organization based out of Toronto that represents a network of land trusts across Ontario. And so kind of like, what are land trusts? Land trusts are community-based nonprofit organizations primarily focused on protecting significant natural and cultural landscapes for future generations. And we're really proud as an organization to represent a really diverse and dedicated group across Ontario. So we represent 36 members, land trusts, all the way from up to north to Rainy Lake and Thunder Bay, east to Cornwall, and south to Windsor. And together they protect 103,000 acres, I believe, of ecologically significant land, and really engage a large supporter of volunteer groups and donor groups as well. And for ULTA specifically, we kind of support a lot of their conservation efforts through different kind of key activities, such as collaborative projects, best practices research, conserving species at risk, climate change action, Indigenous perspectives in land conservation, and also regular training workshops and outreach events like today.
Okay, so this is my part. Since we're talking about Riverwood in particular, today I'm just going to be going through a little bit of the environmental aspect of cycling here at Riverwood. So we have 3 kilometers about of multi-use trails here at Riverwood. And when we say multi-use, we mean that there's going to be multiple different people using these areas for different ways and different reasons. So we have people cycling here, we have people bringing their dogs and their families here, we have a bunch of educational programs from K to 12 that use these trails. Sometimes there's 4 different classes on these trails at once using these trails as well. So when we're at Riverwood, I just want to really explain how important it is to respect everybody that's on this property and the reasons why they are on this land as well. So places like this boardwalk, cycling, if you were cycling on this boardwalk, just getting off your bike and going slower. The whole property is open to anybody in the public, and there's no cost to come here. So it's a great place to be in the middle of Mississauga. We can go to the next slide. So I'm going to first talk about why it's important to stay on the trails and what environmental concerns we have about cycling and even footpath as well. In particular, if you look at this image, we have a lot of hills at Riverwood. And if you were to go off these trails, the trails that aren't planned or aren't organized with the best intention of Riverwood, you could be contributing to a lot of environmental problems. One in particular is if you were going off of the trail and up this hill, it kind of adds to erosion of our land. So we have a lot of different streams and rivers. That's why we're called Riverwood. And when you are going on these hills and you're eroding the land, that dirt, that sediment can get into our streams and rivers, and that can cause a lot of problems for our native species here as well. So just always staying on our trails. And all of our trails are marked with signs, and we have a map at the start and the end of our trails too that you can look at. You can go to the next slide. Another concern we have is just off of the sides of our trails, we have many conservation and restoration efforts. So in particular, we remove invasive species from the area, we plant new native species, we remove garbage, and we try to restore habitats that are along our trails. And if you were to just go off those trails, you may not notice that it's a restoration effort, but even like this little tree that's sitting there, it's really struggling to survive because it's competing against all of these other big trees for sunlight, food, water, nutrients. So it's really important that we stay on the path just to ensure that all these restoration efforts can be successful as well. Next slide. And something else that's really interesting, if you look at this image, it doesn't seem like a very important place, but it is an extremely sensitive habitat and sensitive species that rely on these habitats as well. So this is called a vernal pool, and this is just off of one of our trails that we have. And vernal pools are little pools of water that occur after the snow melts from the wintertime. So in the springtime, you'll see all over the place, there's these little pools of water. And hundreds of frogs and salamanders rely on these little pools of water every springtime to lay their eggs. So even sometimes when there's snow on the ground, these frogs and salamanders will flock to this vernal pool, they'll lay their eggs, and these eggs have just a short period of time to hatch, become juveniles, and then become adults before that little vernal pool is gone with the summer heat. So that's another reason why we always stay on the trail, because this little tiny pool of water doesn't seem that important. But if you were to bike through that, you wouldn't really know what you could be impacting. And we want to ensure that our sensitive species at Riverwood have the best chance possible to survive. Just knowing that Riverwood is kind of in the heart of a major city, they're already struggling a lot to find refuge. Okay, next slide. So one trail that I would recommend to all cyclists, probably the best trail that we have at Riverwood for cycling, is called the CultureLink Trail. It's the one highlighted in orange, if you can't see that. It goes just directly across the Credit River. Oh, thank you, Rashid. It goes along the Credit River, and you can go kind of northwest to Hewick Meadows, or you can also go south to Arundel Park. So it's probably one of the longest trails. It's quite wide and flat, so it's really good for cycling. And I'll be talking a little bit later on why it's so cool as well, because you can see a lot of really neat wildlife here too. Thank you.
I guess we will turn things over to Rahul for this next section.
Thanks, Rashid. So we're going to be playing a video now that's going to walk you through some aspects of cycling safety and trail safety, and we will be re-emphasizing some of the things Stephanie also talked about. So thinking of biking in Riverwood, it is certainly a beautiful place to explore. It has some of Mississauga's oldest forest, diverse species, and the incredible Credit River, which can be enjoyed from the trails and protected space. I'm going to give you some quick tips. And we're going to start things off by talking about the different elements we recommend for your bike, starting with what's actually required by law. So the first thing we're going to talk about here is a bell. So a bell is really important. That's required by law, as is a rear red light and a front white light. We want to make sure that your tires are pumped before you head out, and just make sure your bike's clean. We don't want to carry invasive seeds. Now, a helmet is good. It's optional if you're over 18, but we recommend it. Having some water to stay hydrated is essential. I also carry a snack with me, like a granola bar. Now it's also getting colder in the fall, so you want to have a pair of gloves. I like to carry a pair of gloves that are touch sensitive, so I can still use my phone if I need to check trail maps. A reflective band is also something you might want to carry. So this is, a shiny, it's almost like a piece of tape. You can put it on your arm or your leg, and that just helps you be seen at night. And I recommend it. You can get those for free from the region of Peel. Next up, a patch kit. So a patch kit is something which can help patch up a tube on your tire if you have a flat. So it's compact. It's really essential. You never know what can happen if you hit something sharp. So carry that as well. We're also going to talk about carrying a multi-tool. Again, it's nice and compact. You can keep these all in a small bag, and this can help you adjust minor things on your bike when you're on the trail and something comes up. Lots of different tools in these multi-tools. And you might get a scratch, you might get a bump or cut. So why not carry some Band-Aids, carry some basic first aid. Now, before we go in terms of essentials, it is COVID. So I encourage you to keep some hand sanitizer with you. Perhaps you have to use the washroom. And if you have to go inside in any public facility, you need to wear your mask. So that sounds like a lot, but you can actually keep it all in a small kit, maybe a little fanny pack, and you'll be good to go. Of course, I mentioned the phone already. Maps, phone calls, internet emergencies, have your phone handy. So one other thing we want you to carry is a simple lock. Many of you are probably just biking through Riverwood, but again, if you need to make a quick stop, use the bike parking available at Riverwood. It's excellent, it's very visible. Here I'm just using a simple cable lock. There isn't really a major issue of bike theft here, but use a bigger U-lock if you feel necessary. Again, visibility is key. Having your lights is important, but a simple cable lock is something handy if you need to stop. So I'm going to do a quick bathroom break right now. I locked up my bike, I have my mask on, I'm good to go. So Stephanie already talked a bit about maps and signage, so we're going to re-emphasize this. We recommend biking on the red trails, so the Cullum and Burnhamthorpe Trail, near and in Riverwood, and walk your bike on the secondary trails and smaller sidewalks and paths if you wish to move your bike through that area. You can bike on the road, but again, you're a vehicle, follow the rules of the road, and take a picture of the map so you can have it handy. Here's a look at some of the main trails in Riverwood. So you have the red and the yellow trails. Again, I'm going to re-emphasize these are shared trails. These aren't for cyclists only. So walk your bike when you see crowds, take your time, give yourself space and give others space as well. And use your bell if you need to be seen and heard. Perhaps there's a tight turn and someone doesn't see you first. If you have space and there's no one there, you can then maybe be two to a side. So again, it's so important because erosion is a serious issue. That's why there's so many signs at Riverwood saying bike only on the designated trails. We really want to keep and nurture the nature at Riverwood. So don't go on these trails. Don't go on the eroded trail someone else has made. Do stay on the primary trail. Even if you're really keen to explore the nooks and crannies of Riverwood, just stay on the main trail. And I will continue to emphasize that because the impacts really add up when all of us decide to take a detour. There's some poisonous and invasive species in Riverwood too, and unfortunately that's due to the human use. It's the compromise of the site. So that's another reason you should stay on the trail. We don't want to interact with those species and we don't want to add to more erosion in a site they're constantly trying to restore. So there's some other signs I want you to consider. Park conditions. Are you biking in the winter? Are you biking in rainy conditions? Have you checked the weather before you left? Trail washouts are a real hazard, especially in the winter and spring. And there's signage here to guide you and remind you of these issues, as well as a 311 number so that you can call if you find something particularly dangerous. There's a number of signs I encountered while in Riverwood, so be aware of the different types of surfaces. Some are being repaired, some are older, some are newer. So you might encounter sand, gravel, wood chips, or a combination of rocks because this trail is changing due to how close it is to the Credit River. So just be prepared for it. Take your time, go slow, and let others know if you're coming with your bell. You can also keep both hands on the steering wheel. I know people like to do tricks and have fun, but the Cullum Trail during washout season is not the place to do that. We also, of course, have elevation, as Stephanie brought up. So hills, stairs, take your time. I personally would love to go quickly on these hills, but I like to walk my bike more often unless I feel really comfortable and safe that I have the space to maneuver on this trail, in this case with nobody else around me. So I can zigzag a little to ease the hill slope. On stairs, however, you are definitely not biking. Do not bike up or down the stairs. Please either carry your bike so you can carry it on your shoulder. You can also, as I have here, balance the wheels on the wooden edge. It's like a bit of a ramp. Just be careful. You can also walk it down, carry it with your arms, or you can kind of bounce it down the stairs gently. You know, don't damage your bike, of course. And these are ways you can really ensure that you have a safe experience and an enjoyable experience. So to wrap things off, I'm just highlighting a few websites we have here. The City of Mississauga webpage, Walk and Roll Peel, and the construction notice pages for both the City of Mississauga and the region of Peel. These are places you can get the information you need on trail conditions, route maps, and everything we've talked about around bike safety. So I hope this helps you be safe when you're at Riverwood, be prepared, and just have fun. That's a little snapshot on cycling safety at Riverwood, everyone. Thanks for your time.
Wonderful parting shot too of you like just pulling away in front of the Riverwood sign. Thank you so much for that, Rahil. Really good tips, and a couple of just comments from some folks in the audience right now, just saying great messaging about preventing erosion, yeah, because that is certainly one of the challenges that we have. And a reminder, we do have a couple of questions in the Q&A panel. Thank you for submitting those. We'll get to all of your questions at the end of the presentation. But as we go along, any more questions, just please drop them into the Q&A panel. So I will move on to the next slide and turn things back over to Stephanie.
Yes, so what I think is so unique about Riverwood and cycling at Riverwood is the wildlife that you'll meet while on the trail. One of my favorite wildlife to watch are birds in particular. If you are a new bird watcher, I always suggest to start out in the springtime because the birds are looking bright and colorful and they're all unique and they're all singing their own unique call as well because it is the breeding season. But right now at Riverwood, a lot of the migrants that are coming through are fall migrants, so they're going back to their southern range for the winter time, and they no longer have those bright colors. They no longer make those beautiful sounds, and they're a lot harder to identify. So if you're a new bird watcher, I always recommend starting in the springtime. We have 180 resident and migrating species here at Riverwood, so there's a lot to see here. Rashid, if you want to go to the next slide. And the next slide is just a map of Riverwood itself. Those little red dots that you see all over the map, those are actually where our bird feeders are. So we have a bird feeding program here that volunteers go and walk the trails every morning. They'll fill up the bird feeder and it will attract tons and tons of birds to that bird feeder. So if you're coming and you want to take pictures of birds or just simply watch them, I always recommend starting out going to the bird feeders because they have a large diversity of them there. Next slide. And probably one of our main attractions, especially in the wintertime, is feeding some of our birds. So this little bird is called a black-capped chickadee. It's a common backyard bird, but when you come to Riverwood, you can actually feed them from your hand. If you're very still and quiet and you get off your bike, obviously, and reach your hand out, these birds will come straight to your hand and feed off your hand as well. So bring a little bag of bird seed. They like black oiled sunflower seeds in particular, non-salted, and just bring those with you on the trail and you can feed these little chickadees. We even have nuthatches come to our hand sometimes, and last winter we had a woodpecker that would come to our hand as well, which was really interesting. So if you are a winter cyclist, you can come here in the wintertime and feed the chickadees. The fall you can feed them as well, but it's not as likely. Next slide. Another great species that you'll probably see a lot here at Riverwood, it's probably the first animal you'll see when you walk into the park, is our chipmunks. So we have a lot of small mammals at Riverwood. People come here to just take pictures of these chipmunks. They'll lay out the seeds on a rock and they'll take pictures of chipmunks forever, and we get these little Christmas cards at the end of the year with chipmunks all over them. So if you're into photography, this is a great place to take some pictures of small mammals. Next slide. And also large mammals like our white-tailed deer. If you're very quiet, you have a good chance of seeing these guys, especially along the Column Trail, like I talked about before, near the Credit River. These deer have really big ears though, so as soon as you make any sort of sound, they usually take off into the woods, but they're all over the place as well. Next slide. And if you're down by the Credit River, we also have a lot of aquatic mammals. So the top left one is a mink. It's kind of like a wild ferret almost. The mink are really cute. They'll run along the side of the Credit River and try to catch fish. The bottom left is a beaver, of course, and then it's much look-alike on the right there is a muskrat. So you can tell the difference between those two. Muskrats are a little bit smaller, they have a rat-like tail, and then the beavers are much larger with a flat tail. They're hard to distinguish between each other when they're in the water, though. And something in particular that's really exciting is every fall around this time we have the salmon run, or the salmon migration. So we just went and looked yesterday to see if the salmon were running yet, and unfortunately there hasn't been enough rain for them yet to start swimming up the Credit River, but hopefully in the next few weeks they will be. So what happens is these big salmon, they're 4 years old and they're about 3 feet long. They come from Lake Ontario and they swim all the way up the Credit River every single fall to breed and spawn, and then they lay their eggs. And when they're in the Credit River, they no longer focus on eating or growing. Basically, they stop eating completely and their mind is only set on reproducing. So it's pretty crazy how many of these things will actually be swimming in the water. And by the end of the season, there'll be hundreds of them dead on the shoreline. And it's pretty cool to see, but it's very smelly. Next slide. And Riverwood's great to explore in all seasons, not just in fall. All seasons we have different species that you can see in particular. No matter if you're cycling or walking, you'll always see some sort of animal or plant that you can enjoy too. And the next slide is just briefly talking about our gardens. We have a lot of gardens here, especially right now. They're very beautiful and bright, and we have pollinators coming to them. We have bees and butterflies and hummingbirds, and a lot of photographers are coming to take pictures of our cultivated gardens. And if you just want to come for the day, you don't even have to go on the trail to enjoy all of these gardens as well. And I think this is a good segue into Jeffrey's part, where he's going to be talking about more of our wild plants that we have here.
Yeah, thank you, Stephanie. Yeah, so next I'm going to kind of briefly introduce everyone to some of the really beautiful native wildflowers you could see on your visit to Riverwood. I'm specifically focusing on what are known as spring ephemerals. So spring ephemerals are basically woodland flowers that are characterized by development of their stems, leaves, and flowers in really early spring, quickly blooming and producing seeds. So these plants really put like a lot of energy into producing these beautiful blooms or flowers, creating really large flowers compared to the rest of the size of the plant. And by flowering in early spring, they take full advantage of the high level of sunlight hitting the forest floor before kind of the rest of the forest kind of leaves out and kind of taking up some of that exposed sunlight. And not only do they bring like a lot of beauty and charm to the earliest part of our growing season and really kind of represent, I'd say, a call to spring, they also are incredibly valuable to our ecosystem. So as the first colorful flowers of our springs, they produce the season's first nectar supply. So they're really important food resource for our pollinator species like bumblebees and butterflies. And some species of bumblebees are actually even known to choose nesting sites that are specifically based on high density of populations of spring wildflowers, which is really cool. And up on the image we have here on the screen, I just have a few kind of spring ephemeral flowers you might see in Riverwood on your visit. So at the top left corner, we have spring beauties, which are these beautiful 5-petaled pale pink or white flowers. And then below it, we have the white trillium, which is really easily recognized by its kind of attractive 3-petaled white flowers, which also you might recognize as Ontario's provincial flower. It's on a lot of signage. And then below that, we have sharp-lobed hepatica, which is a beautiful flower with 6 petals. It can kind of be commonly colored white, red, pink, blue, or blue-violet as well. And then up at the top again, we have trout lily up here, which is a really beautiful low-growing plant with a yellow flower that blooms anywhere from March to May. And this plant, I love when common names are like spot on. It's named trout lily because of its leaves. So you can kind of see in the image here, it has some purple mottling or patchwork on it. And that kind of resembles the scale work on brook trout. And that's why it's named trout lily. And then below that, we also have marsh marigold, which is a really showy, beautiful spring flower. with kind of yellow flowers resembling more like buttercups and not necessarily marigolds, and kind of heart-shaped leaves, and it blooms in early May or April as well. And then back at the top again, we have a familiar looking plant. It's a red trillium, but unlike the white trillium, they do not produce a nectar. So the petals produce this kind of like carrion smell to attract scavenger flies instead of kind of our, I guess, typical pollinators to think of like bumblebees. And then beside it there, we have a jack in the pulpit, named after its kind of resemblance of a preacher standing in a pulpit, which is kind of like, I guess, a raised platform commonly used in churches. And these flowers in particular produce these really beautiful clusters of red berries, which are a really important source of food for many woodland birds like wood thrush and turkeys even. And then below that, we have probably my favorite ephemeral flower. It's kind of an alien looking flower. Oh, sorry. No worries. And it's called the skunk cabbage. So this is kind of the earliest flower that will come up in spring. And it gets its name from a really strong odor it produces when the leaves are torn or when the plant is blooming. And this odor attracts pollinators and discourages other animals from kind of like disturbing it or damaging it as well. And this plant is also really well known for a really cool ability it has, which is to produce a remarkable amount of heat, which allows it to basically melt kind of the ice and snow around it as it's blooming. But yeah, it's probably my favorite wildflower there. And we can go to the next slide. Next, I'm going to just kind of change gear a little bit and just talk about a few plants to kind of be aware of on your visit to Riverwood and be cautious about. So unlike the spring ephemeral flowers we just kind of talked about, not all plants in Southern Ontario are kind necessarily. And today we're going to cover just a few that have been spotted in the Riverwood Park area just to be aware of. So next slide, please. The first plant is likely one many of you have encountered at some point, which is poison ivy. So it's kind of a straggling or climbing woody vine. It's really easily identified by the fact that it kind of has three leaves that are always kind of grouped together, and they can either be rounded or pointed. And it kind of inspired this phrase, which is goes by leaves of three, let it be. The let it be kind of meaning that poison ivy, all parts of the plant produce this kind of sap from it, which has a toxin that can create rashes on your skin after about a 24-hour to 48 hours after contact. So it's really important if you do come into contact with poison ivy to wash your skin with soap and cold water. Cold water in particular, because if you use hot water, it can actually open your pores up more and can cause the sap to get absorbed more into your skin. So it's really important to use cold water when you think you may have come in contact with it. But in terms of prevention for poison ivy, and I'm going to say this a lot for the next two slides as well, as long as you're staying on authorized trails, it's very unlikely that you'll come in contact with this. It'd be really more so if you're kind of wandering off and kind of walking into the woods a bit. So it's really just another important reason for staying on the trail. And it's not necessarily something to be worried about because of that. So as long as you're following those rules and signages, you'll be fine. But it's important to keep in mind. Next slide, please. So the next plant we're going to just kind of briefly talk about is giant hogweed. So this is an introduced plant originally from Southwest Asia. It looks very similar to a lot of other species in the carrot family, which it belongs to. However, this plant, its kind of distinguishing feature is just the size it grows up to. So it can grow up to anywhere from 5.5 meters tall, and it kind of has this very characteristic like white umbrella flower shape to it, which can be up to 1 meter wide. Now, this plant can be harmful to humans in the sense that it also produces a sap all over its different plant parts. And this toxin is reactive to sunlight. So if it gets exposed on your skin and then exposed to sunlight, it can cause blistering. So it's really important if you do come into contact with this, again, following similar procedures like with the poison ivy, to wash the affected area with cold water and soap. And then also to kind of protect your skin from sunlight for up to 48 hours afterwards. But again, this is more commonly along roadsides and kind of stream banks and such. So it's unlikely that you'll come into contact with it as long as you're staying on the trails. But next slide. You can go to the next one there. And this is another kind of related plant species, which you might notice that it kind of looks a bit like giant hogweed, but much smaller. So this is wild parsnip. It's another introduced plant. And it's originally from Europe and Asia, and it was introduced by European settlers to North America. So wild parsnip, it grows to be much smaller, about 1.5 meters tall. And it kind of has this like yellow greenish cluster of flowers on top. And similar to giant hogweed, it also produces a toxin in its sap. So it also reacts to sunlight and can cause blistering and rashing. So it's, again, similar procedure as before with poison ivy and giant hogweed, to wash with cold water and soap. And again, before we move on to the next slide, I just want to emphasize, while these plants are important to be aware of, as kind of recreational park users of Riverwood and other natural areas, as long as you're staying on established paths and trails and paying attention to signage, you're really not likely to come in contact with these plants directly. So it's just important to keep in mind. Next slide, please. And then kind of one last precaution I'd say that I wanted to leave everyone with is just regarding ticks. So recently there has been an increased presence of black-legged ticks, also known as deer ticks, which you can see up in the right-hand corner there in the GTA area. As the risk primarily being that it is a carrier for Lyme disease, but not all ticks will actually carry the bacteria that causes Lyme disease. With ticks in particular, I kind of just have some tick tips up on the screen. So just to keep in mind that when you're going out into kind of wooded areas, to wear pants and long sleeve shirts if you're kind of going to be in those areas and not more so kind of on trailed areas, to apply bug spray, and then also when you return home to check for ticks. And if you do find a tick, it's really important to carefully remove them with fine tip tweezers and contain them in like a little container or baggie to report to your public health unit. But more specifically, just kind of adding on to that, a really great resource for ticks is called etiquette, which was based out of Canada, and it's an app and website basically where you can submit photos of ticks that you find. And it's completely free to use. You don't have to create an account, and you basically put in like a little description of where you've seen the tick, the photo, and then within a day, someone will actually get back to you and identify the tick. And then you can see on the screen here, there's also like an interactive public map. So you can see where other observations of ticks are. You can click into individual ones and see kind of the photos and reports as well. So it's a really great resource just to kind of be aware of tick presence in areas you're visiting. And we can go to the next slide, please. And then one last kind of more lighthearted resource I just wanted to talk about is the app Seek, which is a really great resource to kind of get to know different kind of natural features and organisms you're seeing when you go out. So we're playing a short video here that you can see how it works. So basically it's free to download. There's no registration required. It doesn't use user data at all, and it works completely through your phone. So you open up the camera and you kind of like move your phone around, around like a flower or an animal that you're seeing. If an animal, maybe not going up close, maybe a photo you've taken afterwards. And at the top of the screen, you'll see kind of this bar fill up. And the more it fills up, the closer it gets to identifying whatever it is you're looking at. And once it identifies it, it'll provide kind of like an overview description of the animal or plants, where you can find it, where other people found it in the area too. And you can collect badges throughout the year as well for the amount of like observations you're making. And there's little competitions around that. So it's like a really great app to use to get to know natural features you're seeing when you're out exploring nature. And again, it's completely free to use. I can't recommend it enough. Like whenever I'm out in the field, if there's a plant I can't ID, I go to Seek and it is really spot on, or at least it'll kind of send you in the right direction. So yeah, I think that's it for me for this, and we'll hand it back over to Stephanie, I believe.
Yes, so just to wrap everything up, thank you, Jeffrey and Rahul. That was awesome. Great presentation. Just to wrap everything up, I think each of our organizations are just going to briefly talk about different opportunities that you can join in if you are interested. Here at the Riverwood Conservancy, we have many volunteer opportunities. At this time, it's very limited. We just welcomed people back onto our site for gardening, but our other other volunteer opportunities like education, conservation, programming, anything like that has not happened yet, but we're hoping to soon, very, very soon. We're putting protocols and waivers in place to ensure that we can get people back on site for volunteer opportunities here. Also, we're hoping to provide more programming in the future that's actually on site. We've been doing a lot of webinar and Facebook Live, so if you'd like to get involved in our programs as well, just check out our website and go to the events page, and it will have a list of everything that we are doing in the next month or so. Yeah.
Okay, and I'm just going to kind of close too about my organization and some volunteer opportunities with ULTA throughout the year if you'd like to get involved with kind of a community based out of Toronto. So we're always looking for new faces and always to reach out and connect more people with nature. Some general opportunities throughout the year kind of include volunteering on our committees, helping us at events, writing an article for our newsletter that goes out monthly. But we also have 2 upcoming volunteer opportunities through our climate action program. So this program really focuses on engaging community learning around climate change and kind of actions we can take on the ground for conservation and restoration efforts. And through this program, we'll have 2 small planting events that will be happening in early October. They'll be in collaboration with 2 of our Land Trust members. So Rare, which is based out of Cambridge, Ontario, and then Bruce Trail Conservancy, which has kind of multiple different memberships across Ontario. For Rare, the date is kind of to be decided, but for Bruce Trail, we'll be hosting it in October 7th to the 9th. And if you're interested in either of these planting opportunities, I'll put my email in the chat and you can reach out to me and I'll keep you in the loop about when this will be happening. There'll be kind of more small scale events and you will require a car to access the sites. So those are kind of a bit of a limitation that way. But I'll put my email in the chat there too. And I think we're going to be handing it back over to Rahil.
Thanks, Jeffrey. I'm going to highlight just a few of the program offerings within our Mississauga Cycles project. So something that's really big for us is a mentorship program. And this is the heart of Mississauga Cycles, as well as the program we're based upon, which is called Bike Host in Toronto. So CultureLink began Bike Host 10 years ago, which is matching newcomers with mentors in their community, lending them bikes, lending them equipment, and helping them learn about their neighborhood by bike. So that's a major part of their program, and that's been brought here to Mississauga last year. And it's been a great success. We're very lucky that it's been able to continue in COVID, following all the health and safety restrictions. And this program is happening right now with our participants. And if you're a newcomer or a cyclist in Mississauga, someone who's a resident and wants to become a mentor, we're going to have intake, if everything goes according to plan, starting next spring, so around April. So stay tuned for that. Next slide, please. Another key element is our actual rides. Oh, actually, my mistake. Sorry, we have some pictures there. So the rides are a part of this where the mentors and mentees are going on rides. And if you click through, it'll highlight another key element of our programming, which is actually teaching our participants, newcomer participants, as well as youth, around bike repair. So that is our DIY Bike Hub. And this is a place where people can learn, especially newcomers, about basic bike repair. And we're starting to actually bring that to the public as well. So our DIY Bike Hub started last year. It has been closed this season due to COVID. And if we click through, there'll be some other images. But our hope is either this fall or early spring, we'll be able to start back up and provide a volunteer opportunity, so volunteer hours for our participants. While you're at home, there's a great opportunity called Newcomers on the Move. So this is a video series we've created online. You can search Newcomers on the Move on YouTube or go to the CultureLink YouTube page to find this resource. If you complete all of the videos which talk about bike safety and all forms of active transportation and transit, you will get a certificate and an entry into winning a cycling prize pack. So we launched this a few weeks ago and we encourage you to take part and let us know your thoughts. I believe we have 2 more slides. So, right, this is what we've been just starting to do now. This year, we've begun some public outreach and education. I might have already met you at a farmer's market or local park. So every week, you will find us at alternating farmer's markets. On Thursdays, we're at the Erin Mills Market, so that will be next week. And on Wednesdays, which was this week and 2 weeks from now, we will be at the Celebration Square Farmers Market. We're offering great bike accessories and some basic bike repair, in addition to the safety materials we normally provide. Everything is free thanks to our partnership with the Region of Peel. So I look forward to seeing you at one of our events. And our last slide will highlight how you can find out about these events, which is, it's Bike Month. So September is Bike Month. It got moved from June because of COVID. And we've created a resource that puts together the different events, which you can find on the bikemonth.ca website. If you want to stay tuned on our events and our updates, you can connect with me by email. My email is listed there, rmeta@culturelink.ca, and on Twitter and Instagram. So Bike Host, again, that's the original CultureLink program name. You can connect with us on Twitter, and at Mississauga Cycles, you can connect with us on Instagram. So I really hope you're biking more in Bike Month, and let us know if you have any questions around safe cycling. Thanks.
Terrific. I think that's all the slides that we had, so I'm going to stop that for now. Wonderful presentation. Thank you so much, Stephanie, Jeff, and Rahil. Terrific stuff that we covered a lot of ground. Cycling tips, nature tips, not getting poison ivy on you tips. So really good stuff. Thanks so much again from all of you. Before we turn things over to the Q&A, one more poll question that we have for the audience, kind of related specifically to Jeff's organization, which is, have you heard about land trusts before today? So we just want to let you get your input on this, and hopefully if you hadn't heard of them before, which right now is about 50% of you, that you will have learned a little bit more about land trusts. And Jeff, again, thanks for doing your part to raise some more awareness of that. So we'll let a few more votes come in, and we will then turn things over to a Q&A section. So if you do have questions, please drop them into the Q&A panel. We have a few more votes coming in here. And as the last couple of votes trickle in, I'll just turn things over to, I guess, our first question, which is specifically about the paths at Riverwood. Are they dirt, concrete, and are there many routes to navigate on the trails at Riverwood? So maybe Stephanie, if you want to start off with that.
Yeah, the paths are pretty well maintained. We have a lot of gravel paths, and as well along the column trail, it does turn into a cement path at some point. The easiest trail to bike on is always the column trail because it's wide and there's areas that are cement, and it's well mapped as well. I will point out, Rahil said this briefly in his presentation, that we do have washout seasons here where the Credit River actually floods onto our trails. So that could mean that the trail is not always flat and wide. Sometimes it's covered in water. So just make sure you're checking on that before you come biking here. Yeah.
Sound advice. Next question from one of our viewers. I see quite a few mountain bikers riding off the formal trails. So we did talk about that throughout the presentation today. And what's being done to discourage this? Well, I can start, I guess, by answering that and saying what we're doing right now is part of our plan to discourage people from going off trail and using some of the non-sanctioned trails around Riverwood, because it does create environmental problems. So we are doing our best through initiatives like this to inform the public about the importance of staying on the trails. And also when we're at a position where we can have more people at Riverwood and doing it safely, we do try to raise awareness when we do see people riding off the sanctioned trails. Just let them know, like, there's a reason why we want people to stay on the main trails. We're not trying to be the fun police here and say, no, we got to stay on the main trails. I mean, there's legitimate environmental reasons for it. So, we do our best to educate people both during presentations like this and our outreach events, as well as when we do spot it happening actually at the park. So we hope that events like this help to spread the message around. Next question, going to the salmon run. Slightly different question here. Just wondering whether the salmon turn red, similar to those that spawn in the BC rivers. I don't know, Stephanie, if you had any more information on that.
Yeah, so the one I was specifically talking about is called the Chinook salmon. We have Pacific salmon that run through the Credit River, which includes Chinook and coho salmon. There are some Atlantic salmon, but they've been pretty much extirpated from this area. There's a few here and there. But so it's mostly Pacific salmon, and that includes Chinook and coho. The one that you're mostly going to see is the Chinook salmon, and that one is normally a light grayish color in Lake Ontario, and once they start moving up the Credit River, they turn like this very, very dark color, a reddish tinge to them, and the males actually grow a hooked jaw, and that is so that they can be aggressive with other males and basically fight off to try to win the lady.
Survival of the fittest in the Credit River. Yes. Next question, just for people who are interested in biking but may not have a bike of their own, where can they rent a bike? And I don't know if Rahil, you want to.
Yeah, I'll take a shot at that. That's an excellent question, and I will give a kind of long answer.
An excellent answer. Sure.
There isn't really an easy way to rent a bike in Mississauga. I think there might be some small startups that offer bikes in the summer season along the lakeshore. I know there are in Toronto. I'm not sure if there are still in Mississauga, but in terms of a larger company or a bike share program, we don't have that yet. The city is looking into starting a bike share that would cover the downtown Square One area running to Port Credit. That's kind of where they would begin a pilot project. And the main thing that will determine when this happens is how much the public wants it. So this kind of leads to me suggesting to you there are a number of public consultations happening constantly around transportation. I believe the city has actually 7 consultations happening right now around different forms of things like bike parking, bike paths, bike trails, new infrastructure due to COVID, and master planning, which is larger scale plans. So there's a lot of ways to get involved. If you go to the Have Your Say website for Mississauga, you can search this on Google. You'll find there's a number of places where you can actually put in feedback around, this is something we want to see and it's something we need. As of right now, your best bet is going to be connecting with a friend, being a newcomer and being in our mentorship program is one way. And if there is a small business along the lake, you might be able to borrow a bike from them. But unfortunately, we don't have a formal program in the city just yet.
The park, I think specifically at Riverwood, is there a focus to eliminate the hogweed? So one of the species that we want to try to avoid. And I guess perhaps at Riverwood, and I don't know if Jeffrey had any insight on that on a larger scale, but Stephanie, I'll send that question to you first.
Yeah, I'll talk about it specifically at Riverwood, Jeffrey, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Just off the top of my head, we have an invasive species task force here at Riverwood, but that is volunteer run, and it's by our conservation specialist, Derek Stone. He mainly works on garlic mustard, but giant hogweed, I think, is a whole nother monster. I think you need specific training in order to remove it, if I'm not incorrect about that. And as well, I think the city of Mississauga does some surveying along the Credit River in particular, and just seeing how much giant hogweed we have. And I think they have been putting pesticides on it, insecticides on it. Jeffrey, you may have
herbicide.
Herbicide.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, it's okay.
So close.
They're all closely related, right? Yeah, and I guess just like on more large scale, so there's scattered distributions of giant hogweed throughout southern and central Ontario. So there still is active management of them. Various counties and municipalities are taking steps to remove giant hogweed from their lands. I think like common ways are in early spring, they'll do mechanical pulls. So like Stephanie said, I think you do require training for it because it's really important that you use a spade and actually remove the whole plant and not missing any roots because they can grow back quite easily from that. But yeah, there is still active management of giant hogweed. And also if you find giant hogweed on your property, like your own property, it's important to call someone to actually professionally remove that for you because again, it is a health concern as well. So.
Since we have a few more people who have tuned in now that weren't here when we started right at the top of the clock, I'm just going to relaunch one of our poll questions, which is, are you a newcomer to Canada? So I would just pose that again to everybody who's watching right now. And if you voted before, please vote again just so that we have a better sense of all the people who are in right now and whether you're a newcomer to Canada or not. Again, the point of this presentation today was largely to get newcomers involved in cycling and show them how they can cycle at Riverwood, but for anyone interested in nature and biking course. We're happy to have you here. So we'll just leave that poll open as we get to what I think will be our last question for the day. Can residents plant wildflowers on their properties to attract pollinators, and where can you get those plants or seeds? And I can actually come up with one quick answer to that, which is a group that we had done another one of our webinars with recently called Blooming Boulevards. They have lots of information on creating just what this sounds like, blooming boulevard. So how to get wildflowers on your property and in your gardens. So if you go to bloomingboulevards.org, they're another Mississauga-based charity or nonprofit, and they'll be able to give you some more information on what species are good to plant and how to acquire those seeds. And I'll just throw it open to anyone else if they had any other potential options for that.
Yeah, and I'd add to like the Toronto Region Conservation Authority. I think they have a lot of resources on creating pollinator gardens. And one nursery I can have in mind is Trees and Plants, but I believe they're based out of like Essex County more so. But they do have various like trees and shrubs and wildflowers that are all local that you can grow in your gardens. And they'll provide advice as well on what's best to plant, like depending on the area you're living in.
Excellent. And that brings us to the end of our presentation, as I'm going to just close that last poll question. So thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you for voting in our polls. Thank you for asking your questions. And we hope that you learned a lot about biking safely at Riverwood, and also how to enjoy a little bit more about the ecology at Riverwood while doing it safely. And I want to say thank you very much again to all of our presenters today. Stephanie Keeler, Community Program Coordinator at the Riverwood Conservancy, Jeff Driscoll, Program and Communications Coordinator at the Ontario Land Trust Alliance, and Rahil Mehta, Program Worker for CultureLink Settlement and Community Services. Thank you all for some wonderful presentation, and thanks so much to everyone for joining us today. We'll wrap up for now, but we will be posting this on the Riverwood Conservancy's YouTube channel, and when we get that video up, we'll include some links to all of our content and our contact information. So Rahul, Jeff, Stephanie, and everyone watching today, thank you again, stay safe, and we hope to see you again soon.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Everyone.
Thanks, everyone.